Welcome, the anointed ones. The court of heaven doesn't need your permission to deliver its verdict. It only waits for your endurance to testify. Chosen ones. Grab your seat, because this isn't just another message. This is a heavenly legal update. The gavel has dropped in realms you can't see, and the verdict has your name written all over it. For years, you've been tried in the courts of public opinion, accused in silence, sentenced by gossip, and mocked by spiritual amateurs who thought flying monkeys could tamper with your destiny. But newsflash, heaven just filed restraining orders on every energy leech that ever used your name for witchcraft, chaos, or clout. Here's a little fact to chew on while the angels stamp your decree. Even in real-world law, a restraining order doesn't stop someone's obsession. It stops their access. That's exactly what's happening in your life right now. God isn't arguing with your enemies anymore. He's simply cutting off their spiritual Wi-Fi. They can't reach your frequency, can't borrow your light, can't copy your peace. It's all protected under divine jurisdiction. And yes, the irony is delicious. The same ones who thought they could steal your inheritance are now spiritually evicted, watching from outside the gates like, wait, how did they get promoted during a war? Simple. You were under review, not under attack. The delays, the betrayals, the isolation, all courtroom evidence used to prove your authenticity. So sit tight, because this message will expose the legal process heaven used to defend you. We're talking spiritual subpoenas, revoked access, frozen credit in the realm of influence, and restraining orders against chaos itself. You didn't lose anything. Your blessings were just locked in divine escrow until the case closed. And guess what? The case is officially closed, with interest. Let's unpack why the judge just ruled in your favor, and why every flying monkey just got spiritually grounded. Number 1. The spiritual court has ruled in silence, but its verdict echoes through realms. That's the part that confuses most people. Because when God makes a ruling, he doesn't announce it with fireworks. He confirms it through alignment. When you suddenly start feeling peace where you used to feel pain, that's a ruling. When people who once drained you can't reach you anymore, that's a ruling. When everything that used to make sense begins to lose meaning, it's not confusion. It's a divine shift in jurisdiction. You've been acquitted in the invisible world long before anyone claps for you in the visible one. There's something sacred about divine justice. It doesn't need to argue. It just corrects. God didn't need to show up at your enemy's doorstep and declare your innocence. He simply exposed their motives through the passage of time. Heaven has its own court system, and your trials were the hearing. Every tear you cried was recorded as evidence. Every time you held your tongue instead of retaliating, it went on record as self-control under spiritual pressure. What you called unfair suffering was actually heaven gathering proof that your heart remained pure while you were being provoked. That proof became your legal defense in the spirit. So when you suddenly sense a peace that doesn't make sense, that's because your case has been closed. God has already ruled. You are not guilty of what they accused you of. You are not who they tried to define you as. And the silence that followed the chaos wasn't punishment. It was the sound of heaven's gavel coming down. The reason your spirit feels different is because heaven changed your status. You're no longer under review, you're under reward. And the best part? The verdict wasn't just about you being vindicated, it was about divine restoration. The same trials that nearly broke you have now become your credentials. You've been upgraded spiritually, and now your name carries weight in rooms your enemies will never enter. That's what happens when heaven rules in your favor. It doesn't make noise, it makes order. The silence wasn't empty, it was sacred. While you were wondering if God forgot, he was finalizing paperwork with your name stamped approved. The case is settled. The verdict stands. and your destiny is legally yours again. Number 2, your inheritance wasn't delayed, it was under legal review. That's why it felt like everything you prayed for was stuck in spiritual traffic. You weren't being punished, you were being investigated by heaven. God doesn't just hand out power or abundance without first testing the foundation it will rest on. He had to see if you could handle the blessing without losing your integrity. That's why people started falling away, opportunities closed, and certain doors that seemed perfect suddenly slammed shut. It wasn't rejection, it was divine due diligence. While you were crying over what didn't happen, God was cross-checking everything connected to you. He was reviewing every attachment, every motive, and every alliance in your life. Some people who claimed to love you were secretly trying to position themselves to benefit from your favor. They wanted to sit at your table not because they valued your spirit, but because they smelled increase coming. Heaven saw that and placed everything on hold until the contamination was cleared. You thought you were being overlooked, but in truth, you were being protected from fraud. When you're a chosen one, your blessings carried generational weight. That means the enemy doesn't just try to stop you. He tries to infiltrate what's meant for you. God couldn't release your inheritance while people with hidden agendas were still attached to your name. If he had, they would have misused your favor and turned your testimony into a transaction. So, God allowed isolation. He stripped your circle, exposed pretenders, and even let certain relationships collapse under the pressure of truth. Every delay was a filter, not a failure. By the time the review was over, you were no longer the same person who started the process. You had become wiser, quieter, and sharper in discernment. You now recognize counterfeit energy before it even speaks. That's the result of divine auditing. It matures you while protecting your destiny. And now that heaven's investigation is complete, the release has already begun. The things you thought were lost weren't denied. They were secured. God wanted to make sure no one could steal what you were born to carry. The delay was never a denial. It was divine quality control ensuring that when your inheritance finally arrived, it would belong to you alone. Number 3. The flying monkeys are being restrained by divine sanctions. Those people who used to operate as extensions of your enemies, the ones who spread rumors, stirred confusion, and acted like unpaid agents of chaos, have officially been cut off by spiritual law. God has issued a restraining order on their access to your life. They can still talk, but their words don't travel the same way anymore. Their gossip has lost its audience. Their manipulation no longer finds entry points. The energy they once fed on has been disconnected. They're shouting, but heaven has muted their signal. When you carry divine favor, your name becomes a frequency. It's not just sound, it's power. Every time those flying monkeys mentioned you, they unknowingly drew attention from the spirit realm. That's why their words used to have an effect. They were invoking your energy without authorization. But God, being the ultimate judge, saw how they were misusing your name as a weapon, and he revoked their spiritual privileges. Now they're being restrained not by physical distance, but by vibration. You've outgrown their frequency. Your light shifted to a higher wavelength, and now they can't reach you, even if they try. The same people who once thought they could control the narrative about you are confused because it no longer works. Their tactics are outdated. Their smear campaigns are falling flat. What they don't realize is that God has transferred you to a protected dimension. Your presence has become classified information. Access to you requires clearance, and they've been blacklisted. They might still try to mention you, but heaven instantly flags their attempts as unauthorized use. That's why everything they say about you now backfires. Divine sanctions have reversed the energy. There's a peace surrounding you that can't be explained, and it's driving them crazy. They don't understand why their usual manipulation fails, why their words return empty, why they feel blocked when they think of you. It's because the restraining order isn't just symbolic. It's spiritual law in motion. God has ruled that your energy, your destiny, and your peace are off limits. Every force that once fed on your name has been silenced by decree. The flying monkeys can circle all they want. They're grounded by divine order. Number 4. Your energy has become classified information. What used to be easily accessible is now under divine lockdown. There was a time when anyone could tap into your kindness, your wisdom, your love, or your spiritual insight without effort. You gave freely, thinking everyone around you had good intentions. But God saw how many people mishandled your openness, how they took your light and used it for manipulation, gossip, or self-glorification. So heaven intervened and placed spiritual security around your essence. You've been marked as restricted property. You are no longer for public consumption. You are for divine assignment only. The open book version of you no longer exists. People who once thought they could read you can't even interpret your silence anymore. They try to study your moves, but your frequency has changed codes. Every interaction now goes through divine clearance. God decides who gets access, and for what purpose. That's why certain people suddenly feel uncomfortable around you. They can sense something's different, but they can't pinpoint it. It's because your spirit is no longer broadcasting on the same channel. You've become encrypted. Only those operating under the same divine wavelength can understand you now. This new level of protection isn't arrogance, it's sacred protocol. You're no longer just living, you're representing a kingdom. You've been promoted from a spiritual civilian to a covenant ambassador, and ambassadors don't reveal their mission to everyone. That's why certain conversations now feel draining or out of alignment. Heaven is monitoring every encounter to make sure you're not leaking divine intelligence to unqualified ears. You've been through too much training, too much warfare, and too much purification to waste your energy on casual connections. People will start saying you've changed, and they'll be right. But it's not pride, it's preservation. When heaven seals your spiritual documents, it's because your next season carries classified operations, things too holy to be explained, too strategic to be shared. You're moving in stealth now. Your light still shines, but it's protected by protocol. You've been hidden, not because you're irrelevant, but because you've become too valuable to be exposed. Your access is invitation only. Your spirit is under surveillance, and your purpose is under divine encryption. The code has changed, and only God holds the key. Number 5. False heirs have been exposed and stripped of their claims. For too long, certain people tried to attach themselves to your light, as if proximity could make them divine. They watched your growth, studied your ways, even tried to replicate your essence, believing that if they copied your sound long enough, they could inherit your song. But heaven doesn't recognize imitators. It recognizes authenticity. And now, the spiritual system is clearing house. Every person who forged a connection for selfish gain is being quietly removed from the will of your destiny. They thought being near you gave them rights to what was meant for you. Some believed that friendship, bloodline, or flattery could rewrite spiritual ownership. They mistook your generosity for weakness and your humility for permission. They didn't realize that what's divine can't be duplicated through strategy or deceit. It's sealed by covenant DNA. Your inheritance was never up for grabs. It was written with your spiritual signature, encoded in your suffering, and authorized through obedience. So when they tried to hijack what you carried, heaven simply exposed their intentions and revoked their access. You've probably noticed the sudden distance. People you once poured into are now quiet or bitter. That's not coincidence. It's consequence. God has stripped away their false claims. Those who tried to impersonate your purpose are facing the emptiness of pretending. They can copy your words, your tone, even your mannerisms, but they can't replicate your frequency. There's a sound heaven only responds to when you release it. Their imitation doesn't register in the divine system because it lacks authenticity. The spiritual fingerprint doesn't match. This exposure isn't just about vindication, it's about restoration of order. For too long, counterfeit heirs were sitting in positions meant for the pure-hearted. They were enjoying the benefits of your obedience while mocking the weight of your process. But the tables have turned. The inheritance they tried to steal is returning to its rightful owner, with divine interest. Their season of deception has expired, and heaven has announced an identity audit. Every false heir is being evicted from realms they never belonged to, while you are being re-established as the rightful heir of your divine legacy. God is making it clear. Authenticity can't be impersonated, and inheritance can't be stolen. Number 6. Your pain was the evidence heaven needed to rule in your favor. Every heartbreak, betrayal, and humiliation you endured was not wasted. It was recorded. The spiritual court doesn't operate on opinions, it operates on proof, and pain, for a chosen one, is proof of authenticity. When you kept your integrity while being falsely accused, that became Exhibit A. When you chose compassion over revenge, that became Exhibit B. When you prayed for people who tried to destroy you, heaven entered that as undeniable testimony. You weren't just going through trials, you were proving your spiritual legitimacy in real time. Pain has a language heaven understands clearly. It doesn't lie, it doesn't pretend, and it doesn't perform. Anyone can preach faith when life is easy, but only a true vessel can still believe while bleeding. Your tears spoke louder than your words ever could. They were evidence that your love wasn't conditional, that your faith wasn't for show, and that your obedience wasn't rooted in convenience. Every season you survived became a divine statement saying, "This one is real." You didn't even realize it, but while people were trying to discredit you, your pain was authenticating your calling. That's why God allowed certain things to happen, not to destroy you, but to document you. Heaven doesn't reward speeches, it rewards endurance. Anyone can claim to be chosen, but not everyone can withstand the fire that comes with it. You didn't just survive the pain, you transformed through it. Each wound became a signature mark of divine ownership. Your scars told heaven, "This one has passed the test." The reason blessings are now aligning in your favor is because your suffering validated your identity. You proved without trying that you carry something sacred. Your reaction to betrayal testified louder than any sermon. Your resilience under pressure told heaven everything it needed to know. So now the verdict has been delivered, not because of what you said, but because of what you endured. You've been declared authentic, trustworthy, and ready for inheritance. The pain didn't break you, it built your case. And now heaven has officially ruled. The one who suffered in silence has been found worthy of restoration, promotion, and divine compensation. Number 7. Divine witnesses have testified on your behalf. When you felt invisible, when no one believed your side of the story, when every truth you tried to speak was twisted against you, heaven was watching. You weren't abandoned, you were being observed by a higher court. Angels stood at attention through every silent breakdown. They recorded every time you chose patience over retaliation, every time you forgave when bitterness would have been easier, every time you stayed faithful when you could have walked away. You didn't realize it, but the spiritual realm was documenting your responses as evidence of your heart's purity. There were days you thought, "No one sees what's being done to me." But the truth is, not only did heaven see, it took note. Every injustice became part of a larger testimony written in your favor. The people who lied on you thought their narratives would stand unchallenged, but heaven had witnesses. The same way the physical world uses video footage for proof, the spiritual realm uses your reactions. When you kept your peace, that was recorded. When you prayed for those who slandered you, that was notarized. Heaven doesn't need your defense because it has documentation. Even creation bore witness. The air that carried your sighs, the ground that caught your tears, the nights that held your pain. They all stood as silent observers, affirming your endurance. You thought you were crying alone, but those tears were being counted as testimony. They were saying, "This one still trusts, even after being broken." That kind of evidence can't be faked. It's what separates pretenders from the truly chosen. So now, while your enemies scramble to rewrite history, heaven has already stamped the truth. The case is sealed with divine signatures. Every lie told against you is being reversed by the truth of what you lived. You don't have to prove who you are anymore. Your life already did. The spiritual witnesses have testified, and their report is clear. Your heart stayed pure when tested. Your faith remained intact under fire, and your obedience was consistent even when unappreciated. The universe itself became your affidavit, and God, as the judge, has accepted it as final proof that you were never the villain. You were the evidence. Number 8. The assets being released to you are not just material. They're dimensional. What's unfolding in your life right now goes far beyond money, property, or promotion. You're stepping into a higher spiritual jurisdiction, a new level of authority that changes how the unseen world responds to you. You didn't just survive hardship, you earned access. That's what your inheritance really is. Permission from heaven to operate in realms others can't perceive. And that's why the warfare became so heavy. You weren't under attack because you were weak. You were being tested because your next level carried divine territory. While others chase things, you've been chosen to inherit dimensions, levels of revelation, spiritual influence, and creative dominion. God is granting you command over spaces that have been spiritually closed to most. You'll notice how suddenly your presence shifts rooms, how your words carry unexpected weight, how your insight pierces confusion. That's not coincidence, and that's jurisdiction. Heaven is recognizing you as a steward over specific realms of purpose. What you carry now has impact beyond your environment. It affects atmospheres. The reason the warfare felt personal is because it wasn't just personal, it was territorial. When you began evolving, your light started reclaiming ground that darkness thought it owned. That's why you faced resistance from unexpected sources. You were displacing spiritual squatters. Every season of pain was actually a battle for domain. You were not fighting people. You were fighting for permission to reign. And the moment you refused to bow to fear or bitterness, heaven granted your clearance. You've now crossed into an inheritance that can't be seen but will soon be felt. This inheritance is not about luxury. It's about legacy. It's influence that shifts generations, wisdom that dismantles deception, creativity that births movements. You now carry blueprints others will need, and that's why God had to refine your heart before release. Power without purity would have corrupted you, but now your authority is safe in divine hands. The assets being released to you are invisible but unstoppable, favor that unlocks doors, clarity that guides nations, and a spiritual voice that can't be silenced. You didn't just receive blessings, you've been granted dominion. Number 9. The narcissist's psychological warfare became their legal downfall. They thought they were playing mind games with you, but in truth, they were building a case against themselves. Every time they provoked you just to record your reaction, every time they twisted your words to make you look unstable, every time they plotted to destroy your credibility, heaven was collecting evidence. What they didn't realize is that in God's court, intention weighs heavier than appearance. They looked composed, but their hearts were dark. You looked emotional, but your motives were pure. That difference is what decided the verdict. Their manipulation became spiritual perjury. They bore false witness against someone heaven personally anointed. They didn't just gossip. They testified falsely in the spirit, trying to alter divine records. That's a crime in heaven's legal system. Every lie they told about you rewrote their own destiny line by line. God let them run the show for a while because he wanted the evidence complete. They exposed themselves through their cruelty, their arrogance, and their calculated silence. Now, the same strategies they used to elevate themselves are collapsing under divine law. Their reputations, once built on deceit, are disintegrating from within. What they called breaking you down was actually heaven documenting their cruelty. They wanted you to lose control so they could label you crazy. But your tears became sacred proof. God saw you trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. He saw you hold your peace when it would have been easier to curse them out. That restraint was your testimony. Their manipulation wasn't clever. It was confession. Every deceitful act was them signing their own spiritual warrant. Now the law of reversal has taken effect. Everything they said about you is echoing back over their own lives. The same people who built their image off your pain are now watching their influence crumble. The court of heaven has found them guilty of character assassination, and the sentence is public irrelevance. Their voices no longer carry weight. Their charm no longer works. Their masks are slipping because the truth is no longer on their side. You didn't need revenge. Their own behavior became the evidence that sealed their fate. The case is closed, and justice has spoken. Number 10. Heaven has frozen access to your spiritual credit. For a long time, people were living off your light like it was an open credit line. They drew from your strength, borrowed your peace, and spent your energy recklessly, all while acting like it was theirs to use. They didn't love you. They loved the spiritual resources attached to you. Every time they needed validation, comfort, or inspiration, they came running to your energy like customers to a limitless account. But heaven has now stepped in and shut that access down. Your spiritual finances have been placed under divine management. No more withdrawals without authorization. God allowed you to be generous with your energy so that people could reveal their true motives, and they did. Some only came around when they were spiritually broke, using your kindness to rebuild themselves, then disappearing once they were stable again. They drained you emotionally, manipulated your empathy, and disguised dependency as connection. They overdrew your spiritual balance, without ever depositing loyalty, truth, or reciprocity. You became exhausted because you were covering other people's spiritual debt. But heaven doesn't allow overdrafts forever. The limit has been reached, and now every unauthorized transaction is being declined. Those who built their image, confidence, or influence through you are now feeling the effects of divine insolvency. The energy they used to siphon no longer responds to them. The flow of grace that once reached them through you has been cut off. They'll try to operate in the same patterns, but nothing will move. Their words will sound empty, their influence will fade, and their charm will lose its power, because their access was never self-generated. It was borrowed from you. Without your light, their illusions collapse. This isn't punishment, it's justice. Heaven is teaching them that favor isn't a resource to exploit. It's a responsibility to honor. You were the spiritual credit limit they kept abusing, and now heaven has flagged their accounts as fraudulent. No more withdrawals from your peace, no more loans from your strength, no more transactions using your name. The line has been cut permanently. They'll soon realize that without you, their influence doesn't just weaken, it expires. God has frozen your spiritual accounts to protect your divine inheritance, ensuring that your energy is spent only where it's truly valued. Number 11. God transferred the case from emotion to enforcement. For the longest time, you were trapped in emotional trials, trying to explain, defend, and justify yourself to people who had already decided what version of you they wanted to believe. You poured your heart out in rooms where truth had no jurisdiction. You cried, reasoned, forgave, and pleaded, but nothing changed. They weren't after understanding, they were after control. That's when heaven stepped in and said, "Enough." The case left the emotional courtroom, where feelings blurred facts, and was transferred to the divine court, where justice is not debated, it's decreed. When you went silent, people thought you surrendered, but that's when God took over. You didn't lose your voice. You surrendered the mic to divine authority. Every tear became evidence, every false accusation became proof, and every betrayal became a record in heaven's legal file. You weren't being ignored. Your case was under review by higher courts. You see, emotional courts run on manipulation, but divine courts run on revelation. And revelation always exposes what emotion tries to hide. Once God moved your case to enforcement, everything changed. The same people who once mocked your pain began to experience delays, blockages, and strange reversals they couldn't explain. That's divine enforcement, when heaven begins executing sentences without public announcements. You didn't have to prove your worth, clap back, or expose anyone. The evidence had already been submitted in your suffering. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it moves quietly until the verdict manifests. This shift was never about revenge. It was about restoration. God knew emotional arguments couldn't clear your name because emotions can be staged. But divine enforcement is rooted in truth, not performance. And truth has its own timeline. While they were performing for sympathy, heaven was preparing your vindication. You stopped fighting for acceptance and started walking in divine authorization. The judgment was simple. Case closed, favor released, enemies silenced. You didn't lose anything. You were simply upgraded from emotional turmoil to spiritual authority. When heaven enforces what's yours, no apology or explanation is required. The verdict speaks for itself. Number 12. You are now spiritually untouchable by law. This isn't just a poetic expression. It's a divine legal status that heaven has officially granted you after years of persecution, betrayal, and unseen warfare. Every attack, lie, and sabotage attempt was building your spiritual record until heaven finally issued a restraining order on your behalf. What once was a cycle of unfair battles has now become a protected zone under divine jurisdiction. You've been marked, not by trauma, but by covenant. The law of heaven now recognizes you as property of divine purpose, and anything or anyone that tries to trespass will meet immediate consequence. There was a time when people could play with your emotions, manipulate your name, and drain your energy without consequence. They thought your grace was weakness, and your forgiveness was permission. But every chosen one reaches a point where heaven says, no more. When the restraining order is activated, it's no longer about how strong you are. It's about how protected you've become. There's a difference between being ignored and being shielded. They can't reach you now because God has filed a spiritual injunction between their intentions and your destiny. Anyone who tries to re-enter your life with hidden motives will start to experience divine resistance. Doors will close, messages will fail, plans will collapse. Their energy will simply not connect with yours anymore. That's what divine immunity feels like. You're not avoiding people. They're being spiritually redirected away from you. It's not personal, it's legal. Heaven enforces boundaries that humans can't understand. Your territory is now sacred property. God didn't just elevate you, He sanctified you. You've become a walking ark, a vessel of divine power that cannot be touched without consequence. Those who attempt to manipulate or mock you will discover that your energy field is now guarded by angelic enforcement. It's not superstition, it's spiritual law. When heaven declares someone untouchable, no gossip, curse, or demonic scheme can bypass the seal. So, when people suddenly disappear, when gossip dies down, or when enemies lose interest, understand, that's not coincidence, that's compliance. Heaven has enforced your restraining order. You're no longer in the season of explaining yourself. You're in the season of divine exemption. The courtroom of heaven has stamped your file. Protected, untouchable, do not approach. Number 13. Your inheritance comes with new terms and conditions. The days when people could access your energy, wisdom, or blessings without accountability are over. Heaven has upgraded your life contract, and this version comes with clauses written in discernment, not desperation. You're no longer operating under the anyone can come policy. Your blessings have fine print now, and only those who carry integrity can meet the new requirements. Every gift, opportunity, and relationship entering your life will have to pass divine inspection before being approved. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. You're no longer required to entertain what doesn't match your frequency. The reason you suffered so much before is because you were operating with open access. You shared sacred things with unclean hands. You poured into people who only came to withdraw. But now, heaven has restructured your spiritual economy. You don't give out of exhaustion anymore. You give out of wisdom. You don't tolerate chaos in the name of compassion. You filter it through clarity. Every resource connected to your destiny must now serve divine purpose. Not ego, not guilt, not manipulation. That's why discernment has become your new password. Without it, you'd end up financing your own downfall again. This inheritance is not just about receiving, it's about maintaining. God isn't blessing you to prove anything to anyone. He's blessing you to preserve the divine agenda attached to your life. That means some people will call you cold, selfish, or different. Let them. They don't realize you've moved from emotional generosity to spiritual stewardship. Access to you is now a privilege, not a right. You've been promoted to a position that requires clearance, and not everyone qualifies. Those who once used flattery, guilt, or proximity to get in will find themselves locked out. The system has changed. Manipulation can't bypass spiritual firewalls. God has made your heart password protected. This is divine cybersecurity for your soul. Every connection that's meant for you will enter smoothly. Every counterfeit will glitch and expose itself. You no longer have to fight to protect what's yours. The terms and conditions now do it for you. Heaven has officially updated your access settings. Pure intentions only. Number 14. The verdict is final. You've been restored with interest. Heaven's court has concluded the case, and there are no appeals, no retrials, no loopholes for the enemy to exploit. What was once delayed, denied, or destroyed has now been legally reinstated, not just returned, but multiplied. Every year that was wasted, every tear that was shed, every injustice that went unaddressed has been tallied up and converted into divine compensation. The same pain that once buried you has now become spiritual currency funding your restoration. God doesn't just balance the scales, He tips them in favor of the one who endured. You didn't go through all that warfare for nothing. Every betrayal became a receipt, every false accusation became documentation, and every heartbreak became evidence that you were chosen for elevation. Now heaven has released the judgment, restoration, restitution, and reward. You're not just getting back what was stolen. You're getting the interest attached to your endurance. Every delay added divine interest. Every humiliation increased your jurisdiction. You were being spiritually compounded while others were celebrating your downfall. The people who mocked your silence, who spread lies, who thought they'd permanently blocked your blessings are now under divine gag order. Their voices have been restrained, their influence revoked. The flying monkeys who carried rumors, monitored your life, or tried to weaponize your kindness are facing divine restrictions. They can observe, but they can't interfere. You've been moved into a protected spiritual zone where no hex, gossip, or manipulation can touch what has been decreed in your favor. Your restoration isn't quiet, it's judicial. The same courtroom where your name was defamed has now become the stage for your vindication, and this time the spotlight isn't on your pain, it's on your victory. God didn't just restore you to where you were before, He elevated you beyond it. You're walking out not as a wounded survivor, but as a reinstated heir, carrying the proof of divine justice. So let them talk, let them wonder, let them scroll in confusion. The case is over, the file is sealed, and the verdict stands. What was taken has returned with compound favor. You didn't just win, you've been reinstated with interest. Everything that was once used against you has now become the foundation of your elevation. You are no longer the defendant, you are the decree. Heaven has ruled in your favor, sealed your inheritance, and marked you as untouchable by divine law. The battles that once left you questioning your worth were never evidence of defeat. They were spiritual proceedings that established your dominion. Every loss was legal documentation. Every tear was a testimony. Every betrayal was an exhibit that proved your authenticity. And now the verdict has been read. You are restored, protected, and compensated. With interest. The courtroom of heaven has shifted in your favor. The false heirs have been exposed, the manipulators have been restrained, and the narcissists who once thrived off your emotional exhaustion have been silenced by divine order. Your inheritance has been upgraded, your access has been secured, and your energy has been reclassified under spiritual confidentiality. You've transitioned from survival to sovereignty. What once made you a target now makes you a testimony. You're not just walking in favor, you're walking in legal authority backed by heaven itself. This is why your presence feels different now. It's not pride, it's protection. You've become a restricted dimension, a divine asset guarded by law. Those who once had open access to you now find locked gates, not because you've changed, but because the terms of your destiny have. Your blessings now come with boundaries. Your peace now comes with protocol, and your spirit now operates under a new covenant that requires purity as the password. Understand this. What's happening in your life isn't random, it's judicial. You've passed the test, fulfilled the requirement, and heaven has issued its final statement. Case closed. Restoration granted. From this point forward, you walk as one who carries divine evidence that God not only defends, but compensates. Your story has become the courtroom record of heaven's justice. So if you're reading this and it resonates in your spirit, know this: your time of spiritual litigation is over. You've been cleared, crowned, and commissioned to move forward freely. Walk boldly into your inheritance, because this time it's yours by law, not luck. If this message spoke to your soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that heaven has ruled in their favor too. Stay tuned, chosen ones, because your next chapter is not a battle, it's a coronation. God bless you.